Hello, everybody. My name is Clarence Napier, the insurance broker. I am licensed in 12 states, which include Washington State, California, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. Today is July 23rd, 2025, and this podcast episode is about how to get zero cost referrals. And when you're done with your transaction with your newest clients, your hope is that they like the process that they went through. But I will tell you, at least from a personal level, being in front of salespeople most of my life, buying products and services, not just for myself, but also at the corporate level, because I used to buy things for the Fortune 500 company that I worked for. And at the corporate level, I can say that it wasn't too bad. It was actually at least good, because in corporate selling, the last thing you want to do is take a contact who becomes a prospect, who agrees to an appointment, and then you're sitting down with that prospect. The last thing you want to do is fumble the ball with some type of unsatisfactory type, appointment or closing process. Where your prospect has to make a decision to buy or not buy. But I will say, on the personal level, I've seen all types of people come in and not have at the top of their mind that Clarence should get a good experience from this appointment, from this closing process. And I've seen, just from, like I said, my personal experience, I've seen people drive up in very, very expensive cars when I lived in California, and they look like a GQ model, like a model from New York or Paris or something. And they would come to the home, and I could tell within the first 5 minutes that they cared nothing about me. The only thing they cared about was getting that sale. And this is even before I was sensitive to the topic of sales experiences. This is back when I was in my early 30s, when I didn't really know what I know now. And just like back when I was in my mid 30s, and even now, if I get a bad sales experience from someone, it has to be really bad. I'm not hardcore on people who may be just getting started. I can see what it's like, when you're in sales. So I go along with the program, and I don't really get too many bad experiences. I end up buying if I want it, because like I said, I know what it's like to be in sales. But I've had some bad experiences, over the years, but now I'm a little bit more sensitive to it. And if the person is showing up and they've had a good process of taking me from step A to step Z, then I'm pretty good with it. And because I am sensitive to the fact that most people don't want to be in sales, and the people who are in sales, they had to make a commitment, both mentally and physically and all that stuff. They had a spiritual commitment, because it's not easy to talk to someone about a product or service. I found that out over the years, not just for myself, but I've seen it. I've seen people who work in real estate and insurance, and I had a client or a prospect from St. Augustine, Florida, who was an attorney, and he told me, he goes, Clarence, there's no way I could, find my own clients, and that's the reason why he joined a law firm, so he can get paid as an employee. He said there was no way, because he never had the training there at, I think we went to St. Leo College or St. Leo Law School down in Tampa, St. Petersburg. But today's podcast episode is to give you the highlights of how to get zero cost referrals. And again, this is the highlight. My other company is 321 Biz Development. Lots of podcast episodes out there on that business, and I will be an LLC in the state of Georgia in a few months. But 321 Biz Development has a 6 to 9 hour sales system training class where we focus on mastering the 5 front-end sales activities, which include contacting, prospecting, appointment setting, closing, and getting zero cost referrals. So the highlight of getting zero cost referrals is this. If you connected with that person at the very first step, that's when the process begins for you to get zero cost referrals. Now, it doesn't happen like that all the time, but if you are in charge, or if you meet someone and the very first step you were involved in it, meaning you met that contact someplace, or you called that person on a B2B call, then that's where getting the zero cost referrals process begins. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because your contact is checking you out at that stage. You know, people may say, "Oh no, that's not that important." No, people who may be purchasing your product or service, and you introduce yourself as a potential business owner, that's when they are checking you out. They are evaluating if you are pushing. They are evaluating your education. They are evaluating the way you dress. You know, I mean, it's not like they're making a checklist, but they're summarizing all the things that you bring to the table when you first make contact. That's why making contact is so important, because if you want to get the zero cost referrals, you can't just be the nice guy or the nice woman at the appointment. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to treat this person like trash," and then, you know, at the appointment you all of a sudden want to be nice and professional. No, that person will remember that, and in fact, that person may walk into your office with very little probability that they will buy unless you make some drastic changes at that appointment. So the next one is the prospecting. Again, the contact who has identified himself or herself as a prospect is still checking you out. They're looking at, well, are you pitching? Are you pulling, or are you pushing? There's a big difference between pulling and pushing. I think I have a podcast episode that talks about that. If not, well, I know I do, but I might just do another one. But you want to pull that contact to you by, you know, asking some questions. And I do have a prospecting module as one of the modules in the 6 to 9 hour sales system training class. So you get to this point where you have to, you know, kind of like pull the trigger. That's what we call it in professional sales. Pull the trigger. We don't speak like that in front of our prospects, but it's an industry term, and it just means that you have enough information that you know that this person's a qualified prospect. So you pull the trigger. Not sure why they say pull the trigger. As a former combat soldier, but you do that. And at that point, there's some things that happen. And even if the prospecting conversation starts and it doesn't end well on the first round, there's something else you can do. And that's why you need to take the 6 to 9 hour class. So you said, so if the prospect says, yes, let's meet. So you set that appointment, and I'll give you a freebie. make that as fast as possible. Please do not start explaining your product or service when that person has agreed to meet. Setting that appointment should take about 2 minutes, and then you're out of there. So now that person is now at your office, or you're on the phone with that person if it's like a Zoom call. And your job at that point, at the closing stage, is to ask a bunch of questions. Now, it has to be the right questions, and it has to be questions that are pertinent to that prospect. And that's all I can say. 321 Biz Development, we have a prospect interview form that we design for our clients. If you are an accounting CPA client, we have a prospect interview form for that. If you are an estate planning or defense attorney person, then we have a prospect interview form for that. If you have a blue collar job that your products or services cost $1,000 or more, we have a prospect interview form for that. Same thing for dentists, same things for plastic surgeons. In fact, that's part of our business, is to ask you, our newest 321 Biz Dev client, about your business and some of the trials and tribulations that your business has gone through, so that we can develop the best prospect interview form. So, you've gone through the process, you're at this stage, and if you're using the 321 Biz Dev process or system, you have an 80% probability that that prospect will say yes. And again, our prospect interview form, we have there's 2 sections where we get the prospect to sell himself or sell herself. In other words, we get the prospect to want to buy the product without us asking for the buy. That's unique. That is really unique. So let's say the prospect says, yes, I want to be a client. There's 2 things that can happen. One is with the 321 Biz Dev system. One is without using the 321 Biz Dev system. So let's start with without. If you are a salesperson and you got that 7% probability that that person said yes, they're ready to buy, even though that your newest client that you met or they called in did not have a great sales experience, then it's likely that you will not get zero cost referrals. And we explain why that is. If you have used the 321 Biz Dev system and you started from the contacting, prospecting, appointment setting, closing stages, that prospect will easily give you zero cost referrals. And why is that? The reason why is because from the contacting stage to this final stage of closing, and now you've got the ink has dried on the application, the form, the agreement, whatever you use to finalize your transaction, that person is feeling good. And even in the closing process, we drop the hint that we would love to get referrals. So now you're at the closing, you're past the closing process, and your newest client is now ready to give you referrals. So that's it. We have a process of how to get zero cost referrals. My name is Clarence Napier, the insurance broker. I'm also the president at 321 Biz Development. And just to add, we have online networking session 4 times a week, 2 times a day, 7:30 Eastern and 7:30 Pacific. If you would like to be a part of that, please give me a call at 866-901-9876 or drop me an email at clarence@insforsure.com. Take care and have a great week.